Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with a good friend, coach, and mentor, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Hey, Jim, I'm doing well. I enjoyed our half hour of visiting
I
before we
know.
actually started recording today. Just so good to catch up with you, and I'm so excited to be recording today. I'm really excited about our subject.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it then. What's on your heart for today?
Yeah, the title of the podcast today is A Leader's Most Important Assignment.
Mhm.
Um, Jim, I just started rereading a book that I read several years ago by Peter Scazzero entitled "The Emotionally Healthy Leader," and it's
Yeah.
and it's kicking my butt, man. It's like,
Everybody
and
says that. They risk
yeah,
zero stuff. They're like, you ever get a massage where they really hurt you, but you feel great later? That seems to be the same language. Yeah.
yes, and it's really been a fresh reminder,
Mm.
to me at least, of my most important assignment as a leader.
Right.
And
Right.
it's my belief that every spiritual leader and for that matter, every business leader
Hmm.
has the same most important assignment. And so what I'd like to
Yeah.
do today is look at three quotes. We're going to take three quotes from Scazzero's book, chapter one of his book,
Yeah.
and I'd like us just to take them and then we're going to unpack them together. How does that
Awesome.
sound?
Hit me.
All right, so here's the first one. In chapter one that caught my eye. He writes this: the emotionally unhealthy leader is someone who operates in a continuous state of emotional and spiritual deficit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jim, I read that and I it just crystallized again in my mind that our most important assignment as a leader, the number one thing that we have to
Yeah.
do, it's more important than anything else, is the development of a strong inner life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the most important thing that a
Right.
leader can do. I just want to hear your thoughts on that, and then we're going to enlarge on this a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, I think emotionally unhealthy people can do great things in the short term, but the legacy is always disaster, right?
Yeah.
So to build things slowly over time and build them with health and to attract the right leaders, to release the right people, to all those things, it comes back to a father, if you will, or a mother, a mature person who's stable and wise and consistent and has all this beautiful fruit that trails behind them. Everybody wants to be on that person's team. Everybody wants to leave that legacy. So you might have had a great event, but if you destroyed all your relationships and your own soul in the process of it, you've in some ways you've gained the whole world, but you've lost your soul. So I agree. I
Yeah.
think the words of Jesus echo your sentiment that there are things that are far more foundational than the things we see. And foundations are, if they're bad, they're bad. Everything you can see gets destroyed, but you can't see foundations. So that, being an emotionally stable, founded leader is crucial.
Yeah. And so I believe this, that the larger your responsibility, the stronger your inner life has to be.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
if you decide and want to have what we're going to talk about right here, here's
Yeah.
reasons why that's true. One
Yeah.
is humility.
Hmm.
Without a strong inner life, when fruit comes and success happens, pride is a real threat, Jim.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a real threat to believe that somehow I did this.
Right.
Look at
Yeah.
what I've done. Look at what I've accomplished. It's kind of like the guy
Yeah.
Jesus talked about, the fool who had a great crop, and he says, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build bigger barns." And
Yeah.
and and the Lord said, "Man, your life is going to be required of you."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so there is this sneaky,
Mm.
uh, subversive thing called pride that wants to weasel its way into our
Yeah.
life. And a strong inner life, I think, is a firewall, so to speak, against pride.
Yeah. I like that. I think that, pride is the opposite of gratitude, right? Look at this great
Mm,
Babylon that I have made for the glory of my name. And God
yeah,
goes, well, let's examine who really did this. Well, you walk around grazing like a cow with, fingernails like an eagle's talons. Like it is not. I think when I'm proud and that something is done, I go, look at the great Babylon that I have made for the glory of my name, just to some extent.
yeah,
But when you see something great, you go, God, thank you that you still like riding donkey colts. It's
That's
shocking
right.
that the king would enter on a donkey colt, but I
Yeah.
am honored to. I know I'm a son. I know I'm an heir. I know I'm a co-heir. I'm not demeaning that like I'm just an animal, but the fact that he honors the lowly should inspire gratitude, not pride. If we still see him in the picture.
Yeah. And I think a strong inner life helps us to maintain that humble posture.
Mm-hmm.
I think another reason why the bigger our ministry gets, the better our inner life needs to be is for obviously for sustainability and
Yeah,
longevity. You
yeah,
know, we've said this probably at least 50 times on this podcast in 5 years that we're running a marathon, not a
yeah.
sprint. And a strong inner life extends our
Yes,
outer life. It extends our
yeah,
leadership shelf life. Um, Let me give you a couple of other reasons why, Jim, I think it matters, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the second quote.
yeah.
I think a strong inner life lends to fruitfulness, and here's what I
Yes.
mean by that. It's not that we get necessarily get more things done if we have a strong inner life. I think we get more of the right things done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um, and I know that sounds maybe counterintuitive because it actually takes time. You can't microwave your inner life.
right.
It takes time to build it, and which means there's less time to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving a chunk of my day, and for me, it's in the morning, first thing in the morning. I'm giving a chunk of my day to developing my inner life,
Yeah,
and so there's less time to work. But I think what I've noticed is that when I am working on my inner life, it helps me make good decisions about what am I going to work on today? What's the most
right,
important thing to do here? And it's
right.
not the person who's screaming at me the loudest. Um, right. And as a
Yeah,
pastor, pastors get this all the time.
yeah.
They have people coming after them
Urgent
saying, Pastor, you
needs.
should do this. You should do that. You should be
Yeah,
involved in this. You should be involved in that. And if you don't have a strong inner life, you're going to allow people and their priorities to dictate what you do.
right, right.
You need that strong
Yeah,
sense of, we've talked about it, identity, a
yeah,
strong sense of being a beloved son or daughter of your heavenly Father,
yeah,
and going into each day knowing in your heart he's well pleased with you. So if
yeah,
he's well pleased with you, um, when people aren't well pleased with you, it gives you this ability to deal with that, their
yeah,
displeasure, in a healthier way. So
yeah.
fruitfulness, the reason we need
Yeah.
a stronger inner life is if we want to actually bear good fruit that will last. Jesus
Yes.
talks about fruit that remains. I
Yeah.
think it's in John chapter 15. And then the last one, and I really would love to hear your thoughts on this. Here's another reason why I submit to you that our inner life is our most important assignment, and that we need a better inner life the bigger our ministry gets, is reproducibility.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean by that. A good friend of ours who's been on this podcast several times, Josh Spurlock,
Yeah.
introduced us to a wonderful term called limbic resonance.
Yeah.
And essentially, what that is what's going on in my nervous system gets communicated and translated to those who are closest to me,
Yeah.
to those in my family, to those that I lead, to the people in the congregation or ministry that I lead. And so here's how that works. The people you lead are going to take on what's happening in your inner life.
Yes. They
So
will.
if you're
Yes.
anxious,
Absolutely. And people don't realize that, John, but it is as you travel around the churches, is it or is it not true that an anxious leader has an anxious congregation and an angry leader has
100%.
an angry congregation? It's crazy how 10 minutes in the room, you know what the pastor's problems are sometimes by what's happening in the room. The people they've been attracted to that
Mhm.
ministry. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to really
No, I
reinforce
want to
what you're
hear it.
saying. This is to those that are listening, you can teach what you know, but you will always reproduce what you are. And
100%
that is
right.
what will be attracted to you and repelled from you. Is it has a lot to do with you.
That's right. And so I'll just add to that that if you're a workaholic, you're going to have a tired congregation. If
Yes. Yeah.
and staff.
Yeah.
If you are insecure, you're likely going to reproduce that. If you're burning out, you're likely going to reproduce that.
Yeah.
If you're healthy, you're likely going to reproduce that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this your inner life, it is the most important thing you can work on. And when I say working on your inner life, I mean working on your spiritual life, working on your
Yes.
mental and emotional life,
Yes.
making sure that that you are carving out time. Now, we think about social, the relational aspect of our world being an external. I would submit to you, yeah, it's external, but it has a huge impact on my
Sure
inner man.
does. Sure
And,
does.
and
Yeah.
and so when we're talking about the inner life, it's this holistic approach to
Yeah.
building a strong enough life that can bear the weight of what God wants to give to you
Right. Right. Yeah.
in
That's
ministry.
good. That's good.
And
Yeah.
and so yeah, I our most important assignment, please don't forget this,
Yeah.
is what's going on the inside of us. And
Yeah.
I want to encourage our listeners and watchers to contemplate that and think
Yeah.
about that. You know, you
Yeah.
might disagree with us, and that's fine. I mean, Jim and I have been around a long time, so we've had plenty of people disagree with us. But
Yeah.
I'm really convinced that this is the most important piece of leadership is what's going
Yeah.
on inside.
Yeah. Well, and maybe just to back that up, if this is the most important piece, and there should be some scriptural basis to found this, right? And I would
Yep.
go back to love the Lord your God with all your heart. Not he's not talking about hands. He's not talking about checked boxes on your to-do list. He's talking about something on the inside of you. Love God
Yeah.
with all your mind, all your soul. He is speaking to our interior, right? So when we stop
Yes.
what we're doing to align ourselves with being loved by God and loving
Yeah.
him in return. So how do I do this? Do I go see a psychiatrist? Do I mean, whatever you need, but remember, it's going to come back to one thing, and that is that identity. I am loved, and I love, and I love, right? I love up, I love back to God. I'm
Yeah.
loved down. I love up, and I love out. And when that happens, how could you not have a fruitful life? How would you not have
Right.
rich relationships and a marriage and children and grandchildren that are blessed by that life? So I
Yeah.
do see scripture founding what you're saying, and that is, man, if you have not stopped to love God and center yourself or align yourself, whatever the language you want to use, under that love and to reciprocate it back, your life is not in order right now. Doesn't matter how
That's
much
right.
you're getting done. It is temporary because the foundation's faulty. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Paul talking about building with precious stones
Yeah. Right.
versus building, with lesser materials.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, when the fire comes to it, what happens?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes I've thought about that, Jim, in heaven, like
Yeah.
that event's going to happen in heaven. I wonder if that happens in our earthly
Sure.
existence. Sure.
Yeah.
That God brings fire, allows things to pressure to
Yeah.
come and to show us. And it's not because he's vengeful, it's because he loves us so much.
Yeah.
And he's trying to get our attention and say, John, Jim, yeah, you're building a nice building here, but dude, your inner life not where it should be.
Right.
And I love you too much to let that
Yeah.
go on very
Yeah.
long.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the first quote from the book. Here's the second quote from the chapter 1 that really stuck with me. He said the spiritual deficits typically reveal themselves in too much activity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the
And
satisfaction I would get from that quiet time, instead I'm getting it from my checked boxes and the amens to my sermon and the "you're the best pastor we've ever had"
yeah,
comments. Is that? Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the thought
Oh,
process there. And
yeah.
as a young pastor, Jim, I thought the exact opposite was true.
Okay. Yeah.
In those days, I naively thought that busyness was proof of my
Yeah.
love for God.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and as I age, here's what I think about that. I'm not suggesting that laziness is proof I love God. Okay, so please,
Yeah.
I want to counterbalance it here a little bit. But
Yeah. Yeah.
here's what I've noticed as I've gotten older, that I can use busyness as an excuse to
Mm,
ignore or
yeah.
delay what God is desperately trying to talk to me
Mm,
about.
yeah.
I'm too busy, God. I don't have time to slow down and listen to you right now. Think about
Wow.
how disrespectful that is, first of all. I mean, I just said
Yeah.
that and I thought that is totally
Yeah.
disrespectful to God.
Yeah.
And, and I wonder, for those who always have to be busy, they always got to be on the move. They can never, ever sit still,
Uh-huh.
ever. Now, I know that some of us have ADHD, and it's harder for
Yeah.
some of us to sit still.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, is it possible that we're running nonstop because we are deep down, we're afraid what God might say to us if we slow down?
Mm.
I
Wow.
don't know. What do you think about this second one, Jim? This second quote, these ideas around it.
Yeah. I think, the strongest and most consistent indictment that it seemed like Jesus said to the Pharisees was he called them actors, hypocrites, hypocrites.
Mm,
You put on a mask. You are not what you appear to be. And if that is true of our generation today, what would one of the primary masks we would put on to compensate for a bad foundation? And I think busyness, importance, prestige, um, activity is one of those things, because I'm so important. I don't have time to rest. I'm so important. I'm so needed. My life has such value to it that, Sabbath is off the table. Prayer, I don't
yeah.
have time to pray. To read the Bible, to study for a great message, yes, but to read it so God could speak to me, I don't have time for that. That, you see, it's just an odd. Again, we're back to what happens on the inside of us and what people see on the outside of us, and back to that
Yeah.
hypocrites, that sense of, you're portraying yourself. And what are you trying to do by portraying yourself this way? Like you're trying to get an
Yeah.
identity from something fake, because your dead men's tombs filled with, or whitewashed tombs filled with dead men's bones. I mean, that is the first century version of yo mama. I mean, that is a slap in the face to the Pharisees. And Jesus just, rolls up his sleeve and bam, there's no
Yeah.
there's no halfway here. But he's telling the truth. What everybody sees you as, you're not. Stop doing that and
Right.
find out what you're supposed to be doing. And I think in a much gentler way, that's what you're saying today is, what if I were to ask somebody about you, tell me about Bob. And they go, man, he's a hard worker. He's always this, he never that. Wait, the first thing you said was he's known for busyness. That maybe should cause a
Yeah.
concern. Not maybe we shouldn't applaud that as much as we once did, because busyness can be very much a mask that
Yeah.
that we're known for, that we're not really on the inside.
I think, Jim, that it's very easy for us as leaders to spend a lot more time on the public facing side of what we do
Yes.
and not enough time on the private facing side
Yeah, man. Yeah.
of what we do.
Yeah.
And again, you know, getting older has some wonderful advantages to it. And one of the advantages is perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
Because as a 22-year-old out of college, if I would have heard this podcast as a 22-year-old, I would come back and say, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You're lazy. You don't love God very much. What's,
Right.
you don't care about
Yeah.
the world. You don't care about the lost, and all the other stuff. And it's,
Yeah.
and we're not saying any of that today. What we are saying is get the order right.
Right.
Get the order right. Take care of the private side of your world. Tend to that so that the public side of your world doesn't
Mm.
get you in trouble, doesn't,
Yeah.
doesn't do damage to the reputation of Jesus.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Your private life. Here's the
Yeah.
third quote out of
Okay.
chapter 1 that stuck with me. And I'm going to step on some toes here with this, but oh well.
Yeah.
Um, Emotionally unhealthy leaders do not practice Sabbath.
Mhm.
He defines Sabbath as a 24-hour period in which they cease work and rest, and then they
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
So, sometimes I know some pastors that do a Sabbath like 6 o'clock on Friday night to 6 o'clock on Saturday. I love that.
Sure.
You know, they're
Right.
creative with it. You know, some of them just take the standard day, like, you know, my day
Yeah.
off is Friday. And you know, and so it doesn't matter really how you put it together. But you know, Jim, I have heard well, maybe not every excuse, but I've heard almost every excuse in the book when it comes to pastors
Yeah.
violating Sabbath.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
you know, here's some of them. I love what I do so much it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, that has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you should obey the fourth commandment.
Right. Yeah.
It's got
Yeah.
nothing to do with it. So I'm
Uh,
glad you love what you do. I really
yeah.
am. I love what I do. That
Yeah.
doesn't give me a pass.
Right.
It doesn't give me a get out of jail free card.
Right.
And here's the practical side of that. Just because it doesn't feel like work doesn't mean you aren't expending energy.
Yeah.
You
Sure.
are expending energy. When you get up and you preach a half hour message, you are expending as much energy in 30 minutes as you would in an 8-hour workday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so look, I'm glad you love what you do, but don't use that as a reason to be
Right.
disobedient.
Right.
Here's another one, and I've had this, and you've had this, and I know this is reality. It's just a busy season,
Yeah.
and I get that.
Yeah.
But the trap is when a busy season becomes your only season,
Yeah.
and that happens more than you would imagine.
Yeah.
Where you get, and here's why I believe that happens, because you get into this busy season, Jim, and there's this adrenaline release and a cortisol release to
Yeah.
help you meet that demand of that busy season. And you
Yeah.
kind of get on this high almost,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
1 month turns into 2 months, into 3 months. And now you've been releasing cortisol and adrenaline at levels elongated over a period
Right.
of time that your body was never
Right.
designed to
Yeah. You're going to crash.
support. And
Yeah.
your brain gets addicted to the release
Mm.
of those two hormones. And
Wow.
it's like being on crack. And so
Yeah.
stopping and resting for somebody who has allowed it to become their only season
Yeah.
is incredibly difficult because they're fidgety and they're actually detoxing
Right.
from
Yeah.
the overstimulation, over release of those chemicals. So I've heard that. I've heard pastors say crazy stuff like, you know, I'd rather burn out than rust out. And, you know, it's like, okay, you're out. Either way, you're out,
Yeah.
dude. Like,
Right.
stop.
Nice
Just,
you had a choice, but remember the end
yeah,
of the story. You're
that's
out.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
you know, I'll sleep when I die. Can I just, man, I want to say this the right way. Can we stop
Hmm.
with that kind of foolishness?
Right.
It's just foolishness. It's not heroic. It's
Hmm.
hubris.
Yeah.
It's not spiritual. It's silly.
Yeah.
It's just silly.
Yeah.
Um, you know, here's a question, Jim, that I got to in my life where I had to ask and answer this question. It was painful.
Hmm.
God, what's broken on the inside of me that is driving me to workaholism?
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
what am I trying to prove here, God? And who am I trying
Yeah.
to prove it to? Who am I trying to impress? Who am I trying to validate myself in front of?
Right.
Man, that was
Hmm.
painful work.
Yeah.
And yet, look, I don't think, yeah, are you going to have weeks where you don't get a day off? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just going to say it. That's going to happen. If that's
Yeah.
every week, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
If it's most weeks, you've got a problem that
Yeah.
needs addressing. And maybe the question is, God, why am I doing this to myself?
Right.
What's going on the inside of me that just can't say, you know what? I need a day where I realize that God, you could do every week. I need to be reminded that God could do what I do without me.
Hmm.
And Sabbath does that for me. So, Jim,
Yeah.
I went off there a little bit. Uh, Give me your thoughts on this third
I
one.
think, John, saying the Sabbath is just about rest is like saying tithing is just about fundraising. There's a lot
Hmm.
more going on than
That's
just
right.
rest on the Sabbath. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is we need to stop working because there's certain things only God can do, and He can't do
Yes,
them with us with our hands on it. I we This
that's
last
a good
week
point.
we had we were talking about ahead of time, had a very vigorously demanding season, and it's things that we're seeing and things that were unseen, things around the schedule and emergencies that popped up, but they've been very
Right.
draining. And so we purposely we observed our Sabbath this last week, and as we prayed various times throughout the day, over our food or at the end of the day together, that sort of thing. I said, Lord, I thank you that as we are resting today, we know that you are working on behalf of the things you've made us
I love
stewards
it.
over. So
I love it.
we are resting on purpose because there's certain things that multiply in your hand that will just add in ours. They don't expand. So again, if tithing is just about raising funds, then that's all there is. But it's not. It's about trusting God with
There you go.
something, believing that in me giving this to you, you're gonna do something with it that I couldn't do if I kept it. And giving you this
Right.
time, you're gonna do something with it. So even for the guys like I have so much to do, I would say all the more reason not just to rest, but to remember there's certain things only God can do. And what's
Right.
wonderful, I told you before we started recording that all those things now have begun to turn the corner. All the things and as we were thanking God, not making phone calls, not dealing with issues, not calling people, not sending back emails, not now. It's our time to rest. And God, we know that you're working because we've chosen to honor you by not working. We've put these things in your hands. And God turned everything this last
Yeah.
weekend, and
I love it.
everything's not resolved, but things have happened that we had the frustration, the weight was because we couldn't do something about it. It really was miracles that were needed in people's lives around us as we
Yes.
took a break from the conversations and the things, and we took time off and we didn't respond. We didn't blow people off, but if they didn't need us, we didn't talk to them. And if they did need us, we
Right.
said, hey, we'll deal with this tomorrow. But by honoring God with that, God honored, I think, our honor of Him, if that makes sense.
It does.
And did what we couldn't do, especially in a day, maybe a month. We might have been able to do it with our own
Well,
hands.
and I mean, that's just the way, I think there's so much there that we could unpack. I mean, God allows us to tag along.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And I think he does that for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is I think it's relational.
yeah, absolutely.
He could do it by himself, but he loves us so much. He says, "Hey, uh, come here. I want you to, I want you to," and I'm doing air quotes for those of you who are listening. I want
Yeah,
you to help me,
yeah,
so to
right,
speak.
right, yeah.
And and so, yeah,
Yeah.
pastors, I know you have a lot coming at you. Sometimes you have a lot of things coming at you all at once. And maybe today's episode could feel like, man, is this one more thing I got to think about, one more thing I got to do? And let me just say this. It's my sense that today's to do is just one thing,
Yeah.
is your most important. Building your life and your leadership from the inside out.
Yeah.
That's in my mind, that's
Yes.
your most important assignment. So Jim, that's what I've got
Right on.
today.
I think that we're exhausted, so we get a day off as an American ideal. I think working from rest, not for rest, is a God
Yes,
idea. The first full day
agreed.
of I'm understanding Genesis, the first full day, here's your to-do list. Go everywhere, do everything, subdue climb every mountain, explore every desert, tame every animal on your market set. And their first day is the seventh day, right? The day of rest. So from
Yeah,
rest, here's your assignment. Now rest. Now go to work from rest.
yeah,
So
I love it.
working until you're exhausted and falling down is not a biblical concept. It just isn't. So John, thank you
Yeah.
for this, and thank you for the challenge. Thank you for the courage it takes to look at a group of people that have valued things poorly and say stop.
Mhm.
That's not being a hero. That's hubris. I love that line. I'm gonna figure out the
Mhm.
Greek letters for that and tattoo that somewhere on my body just to remind me of that phrase. So anyway, well, hey, listeners, we can appreciate this ain't easy, right? Like you don't understand. I
Right.
built my whole ministry, my whole life, my whole business on this. So again, this is not an infomercial, but I needed John's help. He asked me questions. I ask him questions. We keep each other accountable. Sometimes having that friend is enough. Sometimes a coach, sometimes a mentor, sometimes a tormentor is what's
Uh,
needed. But there's no reason to crash and burn other than you didn't choose the right pit crew, right? So Converge Coaching, it's in the name. We're here to help. We're here to help you figure this out. We're here to help you, all right, by asking the hard questions, writing things on a board, speaking to your staff, whatever we need to do to help you lead a long time in a healthy way with great success and having fun doing it. That's why we get out of bed in the morning 6 days, not 7 days of the week. So if we can help you, let us know, convergecoach.com. In the meantime, God bless you. Thanks for listening. It's been an honor to be trusted in this way for another 40 minutes. And we look forward to the next time. You continue to lead from alignment.